of the Ordinance and Resolution Committee. Just for the record, the members of the committee are myself, Dave Bundy, and Dan Braun. We also have on hand the mayor, the clerk treasurer, members of the Building Planning Development Department, the city attorney, and other members of council here. The purpose of the meeting today mainly is to go over a new proposed Code 166 on property maintenance.
Do I need to repeat that all? Hopefully not. I'm sure it was. Okay, that's good. So this will be chapter 166 of the Auburn City Code on property maintenance. This had been authored by the Building Planning Development Department last year and continued to work on it through this year. And we just got the final revision on April 30th of this year. So would somebody on staff like to talk about the proposed ordinance? I mean, in terms of what I've had the initial look through, there's a lot of reoccurring things that have other code sections, like the weeds is chapter 94, improper vehicles would be chapter 91. And within this section, there's some things that contradict the other sections of the code. So this might take a while to go through and try to finalize this.
And before, Jim, we know this is going to take, this is not a one meeting and done. Because we haven't had a property maintenance code, we want to make sure we do this right. We get it correct. We are aware that there are things that we will be putting into the property maintenance code that may be addressed elsewhere that we'll have to resolve. But before we need to get this into a final form that everyone is comfortable with, and then we can go and figure out what needs changed in other sections, removed from other sections, or at least make sure that it matches so that there's no confusion that in this section it says grass can be 10 inches, in this section it can be 7 inches, whatever those things are. But I mean, if we can get it all done today, great. But I'm assuming that is not going to be the case. So understand this is not ready to be filed, and I've already sent it to Lori, and we're ready to go. This is going to be a working document, but we've worked on it as a committee, and Jim and Ryan have done a lot of the legwork. Now we want to bring it so that we can get more involvement and hopefully get it all eventually wrapped up.
Yeah, if I could kind of continue on with that, the idea with the property maintenance code was not necessarily come up with all these new regulations, requirements for maintenance of property. It was kind of tried to take all the various chapters that we currently have. We have the chapter on litter, we have the chapter on weeds, we have the chapter on abandoned vehicles and whatnot. So we have all these provisions in different parts of our city code. And the idea with the property maintenance code was to bring everything into one code chapter that deals with the exterior maintenance of a building, any building, and property. So we also have, of course, we have our building code for new construction. We have our housing code, which addresses the inside of dwelling units, and that we're not proposing to change those two. We're trying to develop just one simple area where residents could be able to go and know what the requirements are for exterior maintenance of property and be all encompassing with that. So we presented this one ordinance, but we have also looked at the other chapters that will need to be modified, or perhaps even deleted in its entirety if it's covered completely within this chapter. So that was kind of our plan going in. We, like Zach said, we've been talking about this when Mayor Clark came in, is really when this conversation started, and to start looking at how do we better explain what the requirements are and make sure that we're clear in the wording. I think some of the chapters, they've been around a long time. And so some of the language can be a little antiquated. We want to make sure we were compliant with state statute. I just wanted to be clear in what those guidelines are. So that's where we've gotten. We've gone through 4 drafts of this ordinance, we being the staff level with the mayor and the city attorney. And finally, we're comfortable with presenting this at least to the committee to have some discussion with you all. And, is this something that you think the city of Auburn needs? And again, it's a exterior property maintenance code, but it applies to residential, commercial, industrial properties. So it's universal in that aspect of it. It's common for communities to have a property maintenance code. It's actually, if you think of the city has adopted the international code series, so our international building codes, our international 1 and 2 family codes, and our plumbing electrical codes. There is an international property maintenance code that's out there. And that's what this was somewhat modeled off of. The issue with that code is very restrictive. And so we wanted to be careful. We don't want to just adopt that code by reference, because that would not work for Auburn. It could work for some communities. It would not work for Auburn. But that's kind of the basis of what it is. So there's some standard guidelines to follow, but we've tried to adapt it to what we felt was a good first step for Auburn. You don't want to come in heavy-handed. You want to be clear with what the expectations are, what the policies are for enforcement. We tried to make a very clear structure for any penalties that might be involved, where our current codes just talk to up to a certain amount. We want to be more specific. For your first violation, it would be this set amount. There's no question. Second violation, a different amount. So we just went through that penalty section. I think in our unsafe code, it'd be the similar scenario with the property maintenance code. But without getting into the details of the ordinance, that was just kind of an overview of why we're doing it and how it would apply to properties.
Mr.
Okay.
Fincham, if I could add to that.
Sure.
A big part of this, when we first started discussing this, was the police department would get calls about grass, vehicles, all that kind of nature. And then when the code enforcement position was formed, okay, how can we disseminate what complaints go to which department? Instead of all going to the police department, us trying to figure out, okay, the police will take care of the streets, the street safety, vehicles on the streets, that kind of nature. And then the building department takes care of buildings per se. So that when that code ordinance for now, Ryan and I talk about every day, multiple times a day, as everybody sees, the grass is crazy because of the weather, but we're getting calls. My neighbor's grass is tall and all. So those will be able to more divert within the departments of how to establish who's going to take care of those easier with that code. This code maintenance will help that tremendously with that as well.
Didn't we address that when we changed the height restriction so that it was changed from, I'm trying to think back from the police to more of the code enforcement officer?
We were still handling it because we didn't have that position
Okay.
yet.
Okay,
Yeah, we didn't change that at the time.
gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm at a loss really with this being so much as how to proceed. Because, for example, and I know I'm picking on the weeds and the rank vegetation and the tree and shrubbery here, it's been reduced down to less than 1 page. And Chapter 94 has it as 8 pages, I think, 7 pages. And you're just it's taking so much out that I don't know, at least with that section, how to handle it. And going through the whole thing, I don't know if we should just start at the beginning. I don't know how you guys kind of approached it when you were looking at other things. Another one was that I saw that was the inappropriate vehicles. Granted, the current section, which is Section 91, has no penalties associated with it within that Section 91, which I don't think is the right way to go. And this would at least add that $50 fine. But then again, I'm not sure if all of the Section 91 is incorporated within the paragraph or two that you have for Now I'm looking for the page that's on. And I can't find it. Which one is that? That's 44.
Yeah. Inoperable vehicles.
1, 2, 3. Oh, I got my pages out of order. That's why I can't find it.
On some of the vehicles, the information
There we
was,
go. It's like a paragraph and a half.
on the old ordinance, it was actually outdated in some of the out-of-state statute. So that's why a lot of that was condensed and redone for
Okay.
the vehicles.
So is this all state statute?
Correct. We've actually also come up with the form that I presented to the city attorney as well that will help that formula. So instead of us have to get an administrative search warrant to have that vehicle removed, we can get consent from the property owner and the vehicle owner and take getting that administrative search warrant out. We adopted that out of Fort Wayne Police Department.
What happens if they don't?
Then we'd have to go through the administrative search warrant.
Well, I have lots of concerns about this, and I thank you for your explanation of what prompted this, because my first knee-jerk reaction is we're turning the whole city into an HOA, and that this is going to be nothing but a list of things that neighbors can use to weaponize against a neighbor they don't like. So I have those concerns as well as much as well-intentioned as this is. And I don't anticipate with the current administration it being an issue, but will future administrations be able to use this to condemn a property because they want that corner lot for a park or a gas station or something like that? I think those are kind of the gist of my concerns. Again, much put to the side now that I've heard what was driving this, but yeah, I do. I almost feel like we're going to have to go section by section and address some of the questions that we're going to have.
And we're going to have to look for conflicting sections of the code anywhere in the code. So, I mean, this could take a long, long time to go through. And that's fine.
I would rather do that than rush it and have to go back and change it. And I can see going through and just making a note that, let's say the section on inoperable vehicles, if we pass this, we'd have to pass it knowing that we're going to have to review or strike 91.15.
I would almost want to do things concurrently. I don't want to leave things hanging and having ambiguity
I could,
within there.
and I could say, so my plan at least, if we can get the property maintenance code to where we want it, then when we go to pass that and do everything we need to do, we would have all those things ready to go.
Would an option be just bringing the entirety of section 94 into this ordinance, putting it where the weeds is and trees, and just substituting that? I mean,
We could. That's I was looking. One of the
because we spent a lot of time on that.
we did,
Man.
and the determination of violation and the appeals and all that stuff is included in the property maintenance code. But we don't have the trees, spacing, distance from curb. And maybe all of chapter 94 doesn't need.
It doesn't. I don't think it does need put in there, but some of it does.
Some of it does,
Yeah.
or we don't remove all of chapter 94. We remove those sections that are relevant to the property maintenance code. So the issues. Yeah.
I'm looking for the other section that has it. And then you could add to it, there it is. Like the improper vehicles does do, it says, the process for city removal of an inappropriate vehicle for private property shall be described in city code section 91.15. So within then the part on weeds and trees, you can refer to section 94.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so shall we just begin going through the 166 and going section by section? I think like the first part is going to be pretty standard because it's just the titling and the purpose and that kind of stuff. So we've done this before, so let's just go section by section if that's okay with everyone. So section 166.01, the title. Anybody see a need to change the title? Okay. I don't think so either. Purpose. This code is adopted to ensure public health, safety, and welfare insofar as they are affected by the continued occupancy and or maintenance of structures and premises on private property. Existing structures and premises that do not comply with these provisions shall be altered or repaired to provide a minimal level of health and safety as required herein. That all looks good, right?
Yeah.
Did you have anything?
Well, it prompted another question in my mind, and I don't know where to bring this up, so I'm just going to throw it out there now. One of my other concerns about this was what this is going to do to people with, let's just say, limited incomes. The state just felt like they had to address the property taxes because people that couldn't afford the property taxes were getting kicked out of their homes. And I'm wondering and have concerns about what's going to happen to some of these folks that can't maintain their homes. I can think of one specific home in town that if you look at it, that roof has to be leaking. But it's an asbestos roof, and the single woman who lives there, in no way in the world is she going to be able to afford to have that replaced. And it's all she has. And if this becomes an issue for her, then what's going to happen to those types of people? And that's to me is an issue that I don't know how we address it, but it is a big concern. You're going to have people that probably don't like living the way they live, but what are their options?
But I guess my thinking is you gotta have some kind of standards so that the whole city doesn't go to boxing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what to answer that question would be the best result.
I don't either. Something to put on the back burner and keep in mind as we push through this. Does that sound good?
And it does. I just wanted to get that out there because a lot of what my concerns are going to be with this ordinance are going to be centered around that. Is what are we doing to people that just can't, for whatever reason, limited incomes or, there are people that have mental health conditions that live the way they live, not necessarily because they don't like it, but they just don't know better. And those are the kind of folks that I don't want to put in a bad situation with this. And that kind of goes back to neighbors calling complaints just because they don't like their neighbor.
And sometimes you have people though that can, but they don't.
That don't, yep. So it's going to be finding that.
If we don't have any kind of, I don't know, legal obligation or whatever behind to push them, and we can think of, I know Corey and I can think of the same person in a couple houses in town that they have the capability to take care of it, just didn't. So what do you do at that point? You just say, oh, well, and throw up your hands, or?
Right.
So I guess it's gonna have to be one of those things that's gonna have to be play.
And to I guess further my concern from previously, this particular property that I'm referring to is one that not the city, but a government agency would love to get their hands on. Or a taxpayer funded agency would love to get their hands on. So are we creating a weapon for them to force someone out of their home that maybe has nowhere else to go?
I think a big part of this, though, too, is just like we do currently with the properties like Mr. Bunny's talking about, the buildings and stuff. We've worked with them over and over. Our first step's not enforcement per se. It's trying to get compliance and trying to get them, okay, what can we do to help? How are we at? I can tell you, I know I've taken Ryan out with me in multiple locations of, hey, here's the violations. Here's what we need to correct them. and you just try to get that little bit each time instead of just going straight to enforcement. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
I would say probably most of the time, they go along with the fixing it. I mean, you're gonna have some people that keep pushing to the boom race, it's not gonna happen. But there are some people, most people, I would say, if you start, okay, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, they're gonna start, they might have it all done at once.
Right.
But they're gonna start fixing it.
Just remind everybody that this is being recorded, so make sure you hit your microphone so you can be heard. I violated that earlier too. So, okay. Are we okay going on to the next section? Does everybody have a copy of it? Does anybody not have a copy of it? So you need me to read it? Okay. I was just going to have everybody read it themselves, but, oh, we got a copy? Okay, so let's just go on to 166.03. It was emailed, so I just printed it. Let's go to 166.03. Everybody can read that on their own. It's on interpretation and application of the code. Questions or comments on that section?
The only question I had that's already been addressed is how we're gonna do those
Controlling.
codes. But yeah,
Right.
we've had that conversation, so.
Anything else? Okay, let's go on to section subsection 4, I guess I should say, on severability.
I feel like that's pretty standard.
Yep.
Usually look at that.
Okay, definitions, building. I guess I better read these. Let's do them one at a time. So building, any structure, design, or intended for enclosure, support, shelter, or protections of persons, animals, or property. That looks good. City is City of Auburn. That's fine. Code. Yep, that's the name of it. Computation of time.
I think from a definition standpoint, this is perfectly acceptable. I'll have some questions about timing and stuff like that as we go on, but for the definition, it's good.
Department is the building planning development department, so that's fine. Develop property. It's good. You probably just took these right out of the other code, right? So that's fine. But a lot of us are looking at it for the first time. So drainage. On a side note, we've had a lot of issues with that lately, but okay, let's move on to driveway. Pretty standard.
Yep.
Dwelling. Does the time frame really matter there? Like, oh, transport. Never mind. That makes sense. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's an exception.
Yep.
I think that's fine.
Dwelling unit. All right, sounds good. Exterior.
Seems fine.
Yep. Extermination. Looks good. Any questions so far? We're good on the garbage?
I'll ask for just a clarification point because I didn't see it in the definitions, either with garbage or I think refuge, rubbish was one of the other terms used. Solid waste, are we concerned about animal or, God forbid, human waste? Anywhere here, is that something that needs a definition?
Well, under garbage, it says the animal or vegetable waste resulting from handling. Wow, yeah.
Yeah. So I kind
Yeah,
of
just the
interpret that
waste.
as,
Yeah.
chicken bones or whatnot.
I'm going to make a note of that for later.
Rubbish is later definitions.
Does that define, does that definition, would that define like animal droppings?
Like kitty litter and dog.
No, I don't think that one does. Definition for solid waste: solid, semi-solid waste, including garbage, litter, trash, refuse, rubbish.
It's 166.60C. The following are declared to be nuisances, and in 3, it's accumulations wheresoever they may occur of manure, rubbish, garbage, refuse, noxious, or offensive waste. And I think the definition for solid waste would include human or animal.
What's that? What section was that in?
166.60.
That is this code section.
But I'm just saying, if you want to put those together, so it talks about human waste and whatever else together, rather than two different sections of the same ordinance.
Well, this is just the definitions, which are then used later.
I guess I don't see where it's got two different. We've got the definitions that just cover the whole document, and then
Right.
that section that's just
Has it?
explaining what that's a nuisance. So
Right. Should we add a manure as a definition? I mean, I think everybody knows what manure is, but but that's kind of what you were talking about.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
do we need to add that manure as a definition?
You know, if I don't pick up my backyard, the dog waste in my backyard, at what point is that a problem for my neighbors?
I mean, it's in the code, but it's not in the definitions. So do we need to technically define that? Or is everybody okay with just leaving it out of the definitions, but it's in the section?
Yep.
I mean, that's that.
we can define it, but we don't define
Some of
every single
right.
word
I know.
that, especially one that has a very
Universal.
yeah.
I agree. I think it's taken care of.
Yep.
So,
I'll
okay.
yeah.
So let's go on to governmental property. Okay, yeah, I don't think we need to spell out county or city. It's fine with any other. Infestation.
I'll just ask about the guy that keeps bees and has beehives against his garage or something like that. Is this definition omitting bees, and is this somehow going to jam him up?
Depends how you look at it. Is the
I
neighbor allergic to bees? Is it a public safety issue? I mean, it's,
Are they a pest or are
Right.
they,
I guess that's.
for some
that's my
people, they
question.
would be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's my question. If somebody keeps, honeybees
Yeah.
typically are harmless as long as they're not aggravated.
I think these are just explanation of terms that you see later in the code.
Right, so I guess
Just so
my
you-
question is, by not defining it, is bees included as an infestation by the definition of?
Insect.
Includes insects.
That's an insect,
Does that
yes.
include a honeybee?
That's an insect.
And then does it make it difficult for someone to keep bees?
I would think that it would be very difficult. I think it would be very difficult for somebody in town to keep bees, just for that very reason, because there's countless people out there who are, that is a safety hazard.
I think
So that
there's
may play into the question of, do we want people in town to have beehives?
I think there's a difference between an infestation and a livestock bees would, kind of be a controlled situation. Infestation would be uncontrolled rats, uncontrolled whatever, animals and things like that is what they're defining here.
And not that we can't change language, but sometimes when we are defining things or putting things in these ordinances, we are giving some, call it gray area, to the city to be able to look at a situation and determine whether it's acceptable, allowed, etc. And so we can obviously go through and define everything to the nth degree. I don't know that I recommend that, because you're never going to hit every possible scenario and situation, and it's like drafting any contract. If you're drafting it for your client, you're going to make sure that it's beneficial to them and not necessarily detrimental to the other side. But if there's a shift of, let's call it fairness, we want the ability we want code enforcement in the city to be able to do what they need to do so if we define and put beehives in there, what other, maybe
Right.
someone's got a ladybug collection.
Well, it drags up the issue of chickens, and it opens up a whole other list of stuff that we don't want to get into.
Yeah.
So when I bring these things up, it's line by line. These things have little meaning to me. It's just, as the thing as a whole, it's going to make me wonder.
That's what makes it hard when you're not looking at the specific section of the code that definition is referring to, and just looking at the definition standalone. I get it. And I agree with the gray area, because we had some things in our UDO where it's pretty cut and dry, and I think it needs to be more of a gray area, because I think we're a little too strict with some of the things in that code. So the gray area is definitely something we need to look at. But again, you've got to look at specific sections and what the definition is referring to. And maybe with bees, if we want to take that out within that section that would apply, we could say except beehives or something. So we could probably make that change and still leave this definition alone. This is my thought. I don't know. Anybody else have any further thoughts before?
What if we went through the
Code versus
skip
definition?
the definition, and then we can refer back to the definitions as they apply. And
That sounds like a better idea. I
Can
wish I
make
would have
just
thought of
one
that.
Very specific request about definitions then, and the word rodent. I believe we refer to rodents in an area. I don't remember where it was anymore now. I just went back to definitions to make my note. I'm assuming it means mice and such when we refer to rodents on people's property. But if, are we also counting, snakes, raccoons, possums? I mean, I've had a possum in my backyard, living in one of my bushes. So, is that considered a rodent? I think of people that live along Cedar Creek that maybe have a lot of woods. Yeah, I can bet you there's raccoons in there. Should we define rodent?
For
Have we
what
come
purpose?
Have we come across that issue before?
I think the main point with the rodents and all of that, someone's got a hole in their eaves or their roof line or something, and there's a raccoon crawling in and out. That's where that's generally, and we'd have to get down into how the code reads on that, but I don't know that the city, you've got a raccoon and a possum in a cage in your yard that you're raising. That's a different animal than a wild animal lives in a bush in your yard.
That was my last question about definitions.
I wrote it down for later, just in case we need to refer back to it once we get to that section that has rodent in it. Okay, so let's start with section 66.20 on page 6. I believe that's the first one after the definitions. So code official, and this is what the chief was probably alluding to earlier, so the police department's not taking care of this. There, it is 3 paragraphs, so I'm gonna have you go ahead and read through that, and then we'll discuss if needed.
What was that code again, Jim?
66.20, it's on page 166-6.
Do we need to add in there since we got a code enforcement officer now?
I believe that's taken care of with the or appointed deputies,
Yes.
Okay.
and then
Section
also
B.
the police
Yep.
department is.
If at some
Sorry, I
point,
should have let you answer that.
if at some point the fire department inspector would have an issue that they would need that, do we need to add them, or is that covered under appointed deputies? Or can the police or building department step in and issue those enforcement things if needed?
I think it depends. Most of those things for the fire marshal will be covered under their set of statutes. But if for some reason it's not, and we need, I mean, their enforcement ability and provisions are pretty thorough and well defined in the statute that we've adopted. But yes, if for some reason, I guess what I'm struggling with is I don't know what situation the fire marshal would need to step in that's not covered by their either purview or their rules. But ultimately, yes, if that situation came up, Ryan would have the ability to name anyone as a deputy.
Zach, I remember having that discussion, and actually per state statute, your local fire marshal's jurisdiction just lies with class 1 structures,
Commercial
fire
buildings.
code enforcement. Not class 2 structures, which are 1 and 2 family
And I
dwellings.
think that fact is what
And-
made me wonder.
Yeah, that's why we omitted the fire marshal from this, kept them from this.
So we don't want them to have that for these particular type structures, and we want it work.
Yeah, this property maintenance code's for all buildings. It's not narrowed down to class 1 or class 2 structure. It's for all buildings. The fire marshal's authority just lies with just class 1 commercial buildings only. So if he needed to enforce anything, he could use that fire prevention code alone, if that makes sense. He wouldn't need to use this.
Anybody else feel a need to add anybody or
Yeah,
alter?
on C, the code official has authority and necessary to insert for public health, safety, and general welfare to adopt and
Promulgate.
rules and procedures. So what kind of rules and procedures are they looking to adopt or make, or it sounds like that
That,
good to have free reign or whatever.
that could be something as, say during the fair, a weather event comes in or anything else safety wise, or a building we can evacuate, we can just deem, okay, putting people here. I think that's more those regulations of emergency type things with that. Isn't that what we talked about, Zach?
Yeah, and then there's emergency measures in here as well.
Right.
I read that the way that was discussed is the code official is limited to what's in this ordinance unless it would later be changed. But as far as his process, the procedures of exactly how he's going to do it, like Corey had said before, instead of immediately going in with enforcement and fining and all of that, working, potentially working a plan on how he can help them remediate the situation, all of that. I that's intended to be kind of internal rules and procedures on how exactly this is done while following the provisions of the ordinance.
Yeah, its intent is for the code official to be able to follow the steps like issuing letters. We got steps where we maybe post a placard on the door, issue fines. That's what we're trying to achieve here is, as of right now, like if you look under Chapter 94 weeds, Chapter 92 littering, Chapter 91 abandoned junk vehicles, under the authority, only the police department has that authority. So by incorporating the code official, we're trying to give our actual code enforcement officer that authority and take that away from the police department. If that makes sense.
Well, I just think the wording is kind of vague because I've lived through, I do construction, so I've lived through building inspectors that have not been very good. And they make up their own rules and do their own thing. And it takes a couple of years for everybody to realize they're like on their own road and they end up getting fired. And then it takes a couple of years to build back the confidence of that department because this rogue inspector, which would be, a code enforcement officer, just want to avoid that kind of situation. And maybe I don't know if anything needs change, but it just seems kind of vague.
Kevin, would this help? After where it says the rules and procedures as spelled out in this chapter,
That would be helpful.
I mean, because it's referring to this chapter and that's what it's, does that make sense?
Yes,
So you're
that
getting that?
is the intent for this chapter.
Yeah, and I'm good with that, but just to say, hey, you can write your own rules
No.
for safety or
Yeah,
whatever, and that
absolutely
I've
not.
seen this, I've lived through this. So.
Well, it goes on to say in the provisions of this code.
Yeah, that's good.
So it should be spelled out, Kevin, I think. So we should be good.
Well, doesn't it do that in the next part, just like you said?
Yeah, it does. So I don't think you need to add that. I mean, I stopped reading. We ready to go on to the next section? Okay, so let's go on to right of entry. Go ahead and read that paragraph and
The only question I have is I guess can somebody help me understand a little more what an administrative warrant means? What does it take to get that, and who's involved in that process?
We have to petition. We would have to petition the court,
Okay.
and in order for the court to grant it, we have to. Generally, there has to be some health safety issue that.
I think the fact that it's through the courts,
Yeah.
that was the only thing that I didn't.
Yep.
I didn't know if administrative warrant meant that somebody doesn't like what Ryan says as the building department inspector, they can go to the mayor's office and get an administrative warrant.
Nope.
It does
It
involve.
has to go through the court.
Okay. I'm comfortable with that section.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's specific to Superior Court 1. I think in it. So it delegates what court you have to go to.
just reasonable cause always kind of leaves an open door to me. So I don't know how else to say that, but I mean,
Well, and I think the safety net there is, say there's reasonable cause and the homeowner says, sure, you can come in and look.
right.
After that, in order to get in, we have to go convince a judge that
Yeah.
our reasonable cause is good enough to enter someone's property without their permission. And that's the courts have a pretty high standard of what that requires.
Perfect. Okay, let's go on to inspections. Any questions or concerns with that section?
I'm comfortable with it.
What's the required inspection? I call it required inspections.
I think it depends on what the code violation would be, what they would consider that to be.
Do we need to put in there language about a follow-up inspection? Because like the house on 7th Street, you went down and said, okay, you can't be there anymore. You go back in 3 weeks, a month, 6 weeks, whatever, they're verified, they've fixed the problem.
I feel like that's in here.
Yeah, that's usually in there in the letter as well, when the follow-up inspections will be. It's notifying that property owner.
I didn't know if we need to put it in here.
Is it in a later?
It's laid out and addressed in detail with letters we issue.
Okay.
The corrective measures for compliance.
And how long they have.
Yeah, exactly.
This is really just saying that any inspections have to go through either the building department or the deputy. And if someone else does the inspection, it still has to go through the building commissioner or the code enforcement authority, just in general.
Okay, so are we good? All right, let's move on to emergency measures, section 20, subsection 23. This one has like 5 or 6 different parts, 5. So let's do one at a time. So let's attack A here. Go ahead and read A.
I don't have any issues with this section.
I know we've had some issues with that issue, but are there any issues with the wording of that? Okay, enough said. Let's go on to B. Any questions or concerns with B?
I guess the only question I have is, am I correct in understanding that this means securing the building? It does not mean that they have the right to go in and start making repairs right away. If I'm interpreting that correctly, then I'm comfortable with it as it reads.
That's how I read it. So we good?
Yep.
All right, let's move on to C. Questions there? Okay, let's move on to D. We good with question D? That was short. Did you have? Go ahead.
It says for the purpose of this section, the code official shall employ the necessary labor. So does that mean the city has to go out and hire somebody to do it?
That's my,
Yeah, and E covers, the city will, for the emergency work, the city would have to pay, and then we can assess that back against the homeowner. And that's, as I'm reading this, this is taken a lot from the unsafe building code. It's got the same type of language. So what we might refer to the Indiana Code statute in there, just to make that clear that we're adopting what the state has and those provisions that allow us to then go and collect that or have a lien against the property if we have to go do something like that.
That's in the next section. So go ahead and read E as well. So does that sound good? Okay, I agree. The one question I have is that of that as a whole, then, now that we're done doing that, if the property owner disputes the emergency claim, is there a process to go through in terms of,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying?
And that's where we would incorporate the Indiana Code, because that has all of the appeal options and everything.
So does there need to be an extra like section below under like F saying that, or something about Indiana Code, blah, 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 allows you to appeal emergency order? Or,
I mean, we could, I think, if we start the whole thing with pursuant to Indiana Code, but the reality is if we were going to institute something like this, we would ultimately do it under the unsafe building code, but it does apply to property maintenance and everything. So I think it's fair to have it in here, but we would follow the full process. We would give them, notice and everything that we needed to do. I can't think of a situation where this would be a standalone emergency situation that we have to step in and do something where there's not continuing enforcement needed. Yeah, I really can't. So while I don't think it's inappropriate in this section, anything that Ryan has to do related to this would ultimately reference the unsafe building, Chapter 159, and all the provisions that apply there. So when we go to do this, they would be able to figure out what their appeal rights are and all of that. Yes.
gotcha. Thank you. I would suggest, since we only have about 7 minutes left, and if anybody needs to use the restroom after this ordinance and resolution committee meeting, we kind of start to wrap this up. But we do need to talk about another time to meet, obviously. So what's good for everyone? I don't know. I hate to make you guys keep coming back right before the council meetings, unless you're going to be here anyway. But can we do 5 o'clock prior to the next council meeting as well? Would that work for everyone?
typically uncomfortable with that. It's a great time. Unfortunately, I'm out of town this week, so we're next meeting.
2 weeks.
So
Okay.
I wouldn't be here.
And we'd still have a quorum,
Perfect time.
if that's okay.
Might move a little
I'm
faster.
surprised only one person said that.
Thanks.
And if everyone's has any time or ability to review this on your own, send questions to whether it's Jim, Ryan, or myself, we can either have answers for or ideas on how we can modify to satisfy those things, or an explanation as why we shouldn't change it, or whatever that might be. But that could help the process move a little smoother if.
And my schedule changes dramatically in about 3 weeks. So I would be more than willing to come in during the day and go through some things. I mean, if that helps expedite the process, but until that 3 weeks is up, I'm still pretty hamstrung until 3:30. So,
Well, and I guess as far as you're in charge here, but do we want to set it for before the next council meeting, or do we want to give a little bit more time for everyone to read, send comments, and
I mean, we're talking 2 weeks. I'll have enough time to read it before I do that. I don't know about everybody else, or do you want to make sure?
I'm okay waiting. There's no real big rush, right? I mean, it's just something that has been kind of in the background. So do you want to wait till the first one of the next month? So June, the first meeting of June? Sorry if you guys already put it in the calendar. Would that be better? First meeting of June?
Obviously,
You'll be
for
back.
me, yes. And then
I'm
I'll go
fine.
ahead and throw out there that if we want to do more than an hour, by that time, are you out of school, we can start at 4, even maybe.
Yeah, we'll
Or even like 4:30. Maybe it's an hour.
or at noon?
Well, you can't start till 1 because of redevelopment.
would 4:30 be okay with staff? You guys get done work at 4:30, okay? Okay. Let's do 4:30 on the June 3rd. Is that what we said? June 3rd, 4:30? All right, let's plan to reconvene at that point, and we'll pick it up with 166.24. I'll call the meeting adjourned. There you go. Thank you.